It is a country racked by lawlessness, humanitarian strife and a constant struggle for power. Now, Somalia is again stepping into the unknown as Ethiopian troops complete their withdrawal from Mogadishu. Just what have they left behind? Who will fill the power vacuum? And are Somalia's leaders truly committed to peace and security? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. Somalia is beginning a new era, one unfortunately clouded in as much uncertainty as the 2 decades before it. After 2 years of military intervention, Ethiopian troops have now left the region, leaving Somalia to deal with internal fighting between Islamist groups without any clear leadership. In short, the country is still in disarray. Around 3,000 Ethiopian troops were brought to Somalia to combat a growing Islamist movement back in 2006. The offensive sparked an Islamist-led rebellion, and since then at least 16,000 civilians have been killed in the fighting. And even the Ethiopian withdrawal brought with it violence. There was trouble in Baidoa, where the Somali parliament sits. Several people were killed as militias and local police looted the now empty bases. And looming over it all, the widely held expectation of a so-called power vacuum following Ethiopia's departure and the increase in tensions that would bring. Perhaps surprising then that Ethiopia's Minister of Communications, Bereket Simon, had this to say just before his country's troops left Somalia. He said it was a successful mission. The major task was to get rid of the extremist threat. That was accomplished in a swift way. We believe the forces of instability led by the Eritrean government have been dealt a heavy blow by Ethiopia. And then there's the political process, or perhaps the lack thereof. See, under the Somali constitution, a new president should be chosen by parliament within 30 days of the last one resigning. That happened on December 29th last year. And so Somali politicians have met in neighbouring Djibouti to vote on a motion to delay Wednesday's presidential vote to allow contenders time to campaign. At least 16 candidates have declared an interest in succeeding President Abdullahi Yusuf. In addition, the meeting aims to double the number of parliamentary seats from 275 to include the moderate Islamists. Now, there is a hope amongst the international community that this expansion will help the transitional federal government convince the hard-line armed groups to stop fighting the interim government and also the African Union peacekeepers in the country. We're going to talk more about the African Union in the second half of our program. Right now, I want to introduce our guests. In London is Sally Healy. She is an Associate Fellow from the Africa Programme at Chatham House. And in St. Paul, Minnesota in the United States is Ahmed Samatta. He is the Dean of the Institute of Global Citizenship at Macalester College, an expert on Somalia. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Ahmed Samatta, if I can come to you first. All the Ethiopian troops finally gone. In your opinion, what did they achieve in 2.5 years? The Communications Minister think they did a great job. What did you think?
The Ethiopian government and its troops absolutely failed. They now leave behind a Somalia that's even more devastated than what they arrived. As you have already mentioned in your introductory piece, thousands and thousands of Somalis have been killed. Thousands and thousands have been injured. Over 1 million have been turned into homeless refugees inside their own countries. So the Ethiopian government can say whatever it wants, but the empirical evidence is that they have failed in whatever mission they came for, unless the mission was one of destruction.
And do you think this power vacuum, it's kind of a phrase which we've been using a lot when talking about Somalia, do you think it will actually eventuate, that Somalia could dip further into trouble now?
Very possible. The Somalis have no individual or individuals of any national stature who can bring any kind of a new direction of stability and political order into the country, nor is the system in which they are working with, I think, can produce anything that will be able to fix the deep problems of political order, legitimacy and competence among the Somalis. So I think the prospect for the immediate future is rather grim.
Sally Healy in London, do you concur with that?
Yes, I do. I think the immediate future is very uncertain, and it will certainly be characterised by this atmosphere of violent insecurity, which is the legacy of the Ethiopian presence in the country. But that said, I think that it was right for the Ethiopian troops to leave, and however difficult the coming months are going to be, without their departure, it wasn't possible for Somalia to start addressing their own political difficulties in the country.
Well, that's the thing, isn't that the real problem? The fact that there is a transitional federal government in there that is very weak, and probably just as weak now as it was before, and that the withdrawal of the Ethiopian troops is almost being used as like just a current flashpoint to emphasise the problem. Really, the problem's been there for a long time before the Ethiopians came.
Well, the problem certainly has been there for a long time, but I think that the situation that the southern part of Somalia is in now is very much worse than it was when they came in, because it's given a space for this very violent insurgency, which has led to the departure of so many of the business leaders, the civil society leaders, and the very people who you need inside Somalia to help rebuild peace and order, if there's going to be a new political framework for doing so. It's also left this terrible legacy of in the humanitarian side, where the impartiality of humanitarian operations has been abandoned, and it's extremely hard for the real needs of the Somalis to be addressed.
Ahmed Samata, you heard Saleh Healy there mentioning some of the infrastructure problems, the way that's been basically decimated over the years, and yet the international community continues to back the transitional federal government. Why, in your opinion, do they keep doing that when clearly, as I've said, it's so weak and not getting any stronger?
Well, Sally's analysis is on target, and I agree with her. I will add only that the international community, from my perspective, after studying this for the past 20 years, has never really been very serious about its investment in trying to push the Somalis, cajole the Somalis, encourage the Somalis to develop a different kind of a political formula to come to terms with their own deepening crisis. The international community, for all practical purposes, the tears have been one of crocodile type. Here and there, perhaps once in a while, some minimum, shall we say, investment in trying to bring some of the warlords together or individuals who are vying for power. But I have never really seen any major investment on the part of the international community to dig deep and to figure out, with the help of the Somalis who are not part of the warlording system, if they could channel the society's energy in a different direction that can produce legitimate and competent leaders and a political order that is based on democratic peace.
So Ahmed Samata talking there about these so-called warlords, and it's a good time just to pause and actually look closer at some of these groups, the Islamist groups, because it's very important to distinguish the groups and the roles that they play, and perhaps even the roles that they want to play. Now, until the end of 2006, the Islamic Courts Union was the most popular movement. Now, the two most important factions are, you've got the Alliance for the Re-Liberation of Somalia, the ARS, it is a moderate group, and you also have the more radical group, the Al-Shabaab. Now, the ARS, first of all, led by the founder of the Islamic Courts movement, Sheikh Ahmed Sheikh Sharif, initially created to remove the Ethiopian-backed government by negotiation or by war. However, the government managed to sign a peace treaty with the group in 2008. Then, on the other hand, you've got the Al-Shabaab, which is an alliance with Eritrea. They have distanced themselves from the ARS and are fighting to control the capital and other adjacent cities. They also oppose the presence of AU observers and frequently attack their barracks. If I go back briefly to Ahmed Samata in St. Paul, Minnesota, we outlined the two groups there. I mentioned that one of them, the ARS, is considered more moderate. Can they be worked into the political process now that their enemy, if you like, Ethiopia, has gone? Is it a good time to bring them in more strongly into the process?
Well, theoretically it could be, but you have to remember also that even the RAS themselves are divided. Divided, in fact, to the extent that they might not be even talking to each other. There are those who have stayed behind in Asmara, who from the beginning argued that there was no reason to have any negotiations with the transitional federal government. the rather crumbling structure of the transitional federal government. And then there are those who have decided to do so and speak to the Ethiopians and the transitional government, and who have moved to Djibouti. So even the opposition has broken up into these two forces. And then come Al-Shabaab, who are the armed forces inside the country. The tragedy for the Somali people is that it is one thing to fight against the Ethiopians and external forces, but it's another thing to produce capacity at the level of statecraft. And that is where the Somali political order in the last 25 years has really failed.
Quick word from Sally Healy before we hit the break. I was asking Ahmed Samata there about the ARS, and ask you about Al-Shabaab. Is that the real threat, if you like, if I can use that word, threat for Somalia going forward now, given that they are considered the more radical group?
Well, I think the threat is, or the risk is, that the Shabaab group who united against the Ethiopian threat will be liable to fragment and go into different fractions, which is the tendency that's happened throughout this long story of Somalia's breakdown. And the risk will be of that grand alliance which was formed to fight Ethiopia then turning upon each other.
Stick around, folks. We're going to take a quick break on Inside Story. When we come back, we'll look closer at the African Union. Can an already weak force make any impact on security in war-torn Somalia? We're back in a moment.